The Solomon Islands, a scattered chain of emerald specks in the South Pacific, had slumbered under Japanese occupation since early 1942. Their coral atolls and volcanic peaks transformed into forward bases for the Imperial Navy's drive toward Australia. Guadalcanal, the largest of the chain, was no paradise. It was a malarial hell of kunai grass, mangrove swamps, and razor-backed ridges where the air hung heavy with humidity and the buzz of unseen threats. On August 7, 1942, the first major Allied offensive of the Pacific War erupted here, Operation Watchtower. 11,000 Marines of the 1st Marine Division splashed ashore at Red Beach, their Higgins boats grinding onto reefs under a sky laced with zeros. Among them were the Minamichiki, Mortarmen of Company K, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, a weapons platoon under 2nd Lieutenant Joe Tersey, whose 60mm mortars would soon become the division's unsung artillery in the jungle's unforgiving embrace. Sergeant Frank Iron Mike Donovan wiped sweat from his brow, the salt stinging like a fresh wound, as he wrestled the base plate of his M2 60mm mortar into the black volcanic soil. At 24, Donovan was a Brooklyn dock worker turned devil dog, his arms corded from years of heaving crates, now heaving 11-pound shells in a world gone mad. His crew, Corporal Eddie Ramirez on the sights, Private First Class Tommy Kid Riley loading rounds, and the wiry baseplate man, Private Lou Ghost Bianchi, huddled in a hasty pit 200 yards behind the front line along the Overland Trail. The trail, a muddy scar hacked through the jungle, snaked from Hendersonfield eastward toward the Matnacow River, a lifeline for supplies and a gauntlet for patrols. "Lock it down, Ghost. Jerry's mortar boys ain't playing today," Donovan growled, his voice a low rumble over the distant thump of naval guns. But these weren't Jerry's mortars. In the Pacific, the enemy was the Emperor's fanatics, Imperial Japanese Army troops who fought with banzai charges and knee mortars that whispered death from the treetops. The 60mm M2, a lightweight beast at 45 pounds, was the Marines' equalizer, portable enough for jungle humping and deadly at up to 1,800 yards with high explosive rounds that arced like judgment from above. Tersey, a towering All-American football star from Fordham, crouched nearby, his map smeared with red grease pencil. At 22, he commanded the light weapons platoon, 3 30-cal machine gun squads, and 2 60mm mortar sections, a total of 40 men who bridged a gap between rifle fire and the heavier 81mm support from M Company, the battalion's heavy weapons outfit. "Donovan, Ramirez, get those tubes zeroed on the kunai. If the Nips probe tonight, we'll drop hell on them before they hit the wire." Tersey's voice carried the clipped authority of Camp Pendleton drills, but his eyes betrayed the greenhorn nerves. This was no Louisiana maneuver. Guadalcanal was the first offensive punch after Pearl Harbor, a test of MacArthur's island-hopping strategy to choke Japan's supply lines. The landing had been a baptism of fire. At dawn on D-Day, Company K hit the beaches under a hail of 75mm shells from Japanese shore batteries on nearby Savo Island, their Amtraks churning coral into froth. By noon, the regiment had seized the airfield, dubbed Henderson Field after a fallen aviator, but the cost was immediate. 44 dead, 70 wounded in the initial assault. Donovan's crew had humped their mortars inland, the tubes slung on bamboo poles, shells in haversacks that chafed like chains. Malaria mosquitoes feasted from the first dusk, and Japanese infiltrators, shadowy figures in faded khaki, slipped through the lines, garroting sentries with fishing wire. As night fell on August 21st, the Battle of the Tanaru River ignited. Elements of the 1st Raida Battalion clashed with the Japanese Ichiki detachment, 2,000 fanatics under Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki charging across the Ilu River sandbar in a suicidal wave. From their position a mile inland, Donovan's mortar section received the frantic call, "Fire mission, grid Echo 3, enemy infantry massing." Ramirez cranked the elevation to 800 mils, the bipod legs sinking into muck as Riley dropped the first round down the tube. The cough of the mortar was a guttural bark, the shell whistling skyward before plunging into the riverbed, erupting in a geyser of sand and screams.
Adjust fire, left 50, add 100. Terzi barked into the field phone, coordinating with forward observers from the raiders. Donovan's crew fired 20 rounds in 5 minutes, their arms burning, the jungle alive with the chatter of Garans and the staccato of Nambus. The Japanese assault shattered against the marine line. Ichiki's men cut down in heaps, 777 dead, the river running red. But victory tasted of rust. Donovan lost a loader to a stray knee mortar round. The kid's chest caved in like a crushed can, his last words a gurgle about his ma's apple pie. Weeks blurred into a siege of attrition. Henderson Field became the slot's bullseye, Japanese cruisers shelling nightly from Iron Bottom Sound, their 8-inch guns turning the jungle to matchwood. Donovan's platoon rotated into the perimeter defense, their mortars emplaced in foxholes roofed with coconut logs. Rain fell in sheets, turning trails to quagmires where men slipped and drowned in mud. Dysentery and dengue felled more Marines than bullets. By September, half the company nursed fevers, quinine tablets doled like precious gems. September 12 dawned muggy, the air thick with the rot of unburied dead. Terzi's listening post, volunteers including PFC Don Deacon Bishop, pushed east along the overland trail, ears straining for the telltale clink of Arasaka rifles. Bishop, a lanky Ohio farm boy nicknamed for his pious streak, clutched his M1 carbine, heart pounding like a bass drum. Contact, Japs, 200 yards. The patrol stumbled into the vanguard of the Japanese Kuma Battalion, 3,000 fresh troops under Colonel Kanori Uemura, probing for weaknesses in the Marine lines. The skirmish erupted in muzzle flashes and screams, the patrol falling back under a hail of grenades. Terzi rallied his weapons platoon, mortars slung as the company dug in along the trail's ridge. That night, September 13, the assault crashed home. Japanese bugles wailed from the kunai grass, waves of men charging with fixed bayonets, their officers whipping stragglers forward. "Incoming! Mortars up!" Donovan yelled as his crew dropping rounds as fast as Riley could load. The 60mm shells arced high, plunging into the grass 30 yards ahead, the vertical fire a godsend in the close-quarters melee. Bianchi sighted on bursts of orange from enemy Nambus, adjusting for windage whipped by the storm. From M Company's 81mm positions 500 yards rear, heavier thuds joined the chorus, plunging fire that cratered the field, shredding Japanese ranks. Terzi's machine guns chattered in interlocking arcs, but the line buckled in places, Marines bayoneting shadows in the flash-lit dark. Bishop, hunkered in a foxhole, fired until his Garand janged, then clubbed an infiltrator with the buttstock, his prayers mingling with curses. By dawn, the assault broke. 350 Japanese dead strewn like cordwood, the trail a charnel house. Company K tallied 3 dead, Private Bertram Hanscom, Private Harold Enias and a runner, and 17 wounded, but held the line, safeguarding the airfield in Vandegrift's HQ. Donovan slumped against his tube, hands blistered raw, the barrel smoking like a chimney. "That's for Philly, you bastards," he muttered, thinking of his kid brother stateside. Ramirez lit a lucky, the flame dancing in his eyes. "Sarge, how many you figure we dropped?" Donovan shrugged. "Enough to make the Emperor blink, but they'll be back, always are." The campaign dragged into February 1943, a 6-month grind that cost the 1st Division 1,600 dead and 4,200 wounded, disease claiming triple that. Terzi's platoon rotated off the line for R&R, rest and recuperation in the rear, where Australian nurses dispensed sulfa and sympathy. Private Noel Billy Guise scrawled in his diary by flashlight, September 7th. Rained all night and mud is ankle deep. We're still eating Jap food and it's full of worms. September 12. Quiet night. God, I hope they feed us today. Evacuated to Australia in February, the old breed licked wounds and refitted, their mortars crated for the next hop. But Guadalcanal forged them. Donovan's crew, blooded in the island's cauldron, carried scars and stories, the whistle of incoming rounds, the thud of shells finding mark, the brotherhood born in fire. As the division shipped out, Terzi penned a letter home. "Ma, the mortars sing louder than Fordham cheers. Tell the boys we're winning. For them." The jungle receded, but the war's rhythm pulsed on, toward ridges bloodier still.
The island of Peleliu, a jagged coral splinter in the Palau chain, rose from the Philippine Sea like a shark's fin, its surface a labyrinth of razor coral, sinkholes, and umbrella-shaped banyan trees that choked the sun. In September 1944, as MacArthur's Southwest Pacific Command leaped toward the Philippines. Peleliu became the anvil for Operation Stalemate 2, a diversionary strike to draw Japanese air power from Leyte Gulf. But it was no feint. 28,000 Marines of the 1st Marine Division, veterans of Guadalcanal's mud and Tarawa's reefs, stormed ashore on September 15th under a barrage of 2,400 naval shells that turned the beaches to powder. Among the assault waves were the Mortarmen of Weapons Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, now under Captain Elias Eli Harlan, a hard-bitten Texan who traded his 60mm tubes for the heavier 81mm M1 in the division's refit, poised to turn the island's bloody ridges into graveyards. Sergeant Frank Donovan, promoted to platoon sergeant after Guadalcanal's grinder, shouldered the base plate of his 81mm mortar, the weapon's 132-pound bulk, a beast that demanded 4 men to hump. At 26, Donovan's Brooklyn Edge had softened into a leathery calm, scarred by malaria scars and the ghosts of the Tanaru. His crew had evolved. Eddie Ramirez, now a corporal with a Silver Star for that September night on the trail, manned the sights. Tommy Riley, the kid all grown at 20, loaded with mechanical fury, and Lou Bianchi, the ghost, had been replaced by Private First Class Sammy Boomer Levy, a Jewish kid from the Bronx, whose dry wit masked a gambler's nerve. "Sarge, this rock looks like God dropped it and forgot," Levy quipped as their Amtrak wallowed toward White Beach 2, the LVT's ramp slamming down into waist-deep surf. The landing was deceptively smooth. Japanese artillery, hidden in caves on the Umar Mountains, held fire until the Marines were ashore, then unleashed hell from 500 emplacements. By 900 hours, the 1st Marines had clawed 500 yards inland, but Peleliu's terrain was a Marine's nightmare. Crushed coral that drained boots like sand, sinkholes swallowing men whole, and air thick with the stench of phosphorus and rotting fronds. Harlan's company, 8 81mm tubes and 4 60mm lights, supporting the battalion's rifle companies, and placed on the inland edge of the airfield. Their pits dug in earthquake-cracked earth. The 81mm M1, with its 3,700-yard range and 33-pound HE rounds, was a jungle buster, but accuracy demanded spotters who could see through the canopy. Tube 1 zeroed on Bloody Nose Ridge, grid Papa 7, Harlan radioed, his voice crackling over the SCR 300 backpack set. The ridge, a 300-foot escarpment of honeycombed limestone pocked with 150 Japanese pillboxes, loomed 2,000 yards east, a meat grinder where Colonel Lewis Puller's 1st Regiment bled for every yard. Japanese defenders, 10,000 fanatics of the 14th Infantry Division under Colonel Nakagawa, had tunneled the rock like termites, emerging only to snipe or lob grenades. Sergeant Donovan's section fired the first mission at 1100, a creeping barrage to soften the approaches for Charlie Company's assault. Fire. Riley dropped the round, the mortar's boom a thunderclap that shook palms, the shell arcing high before cratering the ridge's face in a bloom of fire and shale. The response was immediate. Japanese 70mm infantry guns, dubbed Screaming Mimis for their Banshee wail, zeroed on the mortar line, shells burrowing like gophers. One struck 50 yards left, flinging Levy into a coral outcrop, his leg gashed to the bone. "Medic, Boomer's hit," Ramirez yelled, dragging him to cover as shrapnel whined like hornets. Harlan dashed forward, sulfa powder in hand, binding the wound with a tourniquet from his kit. "Hang on, son. You're buying the beers after this." Levy grimaced a grin. "Only if it's Monchevitz, Cap." By noon, the platoon had fired 150 rounds, but the ridge repulsed the assault. Puller's men lost 100 in the first day, the coral sucking their blood like a sponge. Peleliu devolved into a 72-day inferno, the hottest battle of the Pacific War, with temperatures topping 115 degrees F in the shade that didn't exist. The airfield fell September 16th, but the Umar Pocket, a 4-by-2-mile warren of ridges, dubbed Bloody Nose, Waltz Ridge, and The Point, became a charnel house. Harlan's mortarmen rotated into forward positions, their tubes manhandled up goat paths under fire, spotters climbing banyans for eyes on target. September 20th marked the push for Bloody Nose.
Forward observer Lieutenant Whisper, a lanky Virginian with a megaphone voice, crawled to the crest, his binoculars fogged with sweat. Enemy bunkers at 11 o'clock, range 600, danger close, he whispered into the phone line, the wire snaking back to Harlan's command post. The order rippled. 81s and 60s, fire for effect, smoke first, then HE. Donovan's tube coughed 6 rounds of WP, white phosphorus, that bloomed like hellish flowers, choking the caves with choking fumes. Follow-up HE shells from the 11th Marines' 105mm howitzers joined, but the Japanese counter-battery was surgical. A 75mm pack howitzer, camouflaged in a sinkhole, bracketed the position. The third shell air-burst overhead, frag peppering Riley like buckshot, shredding his pack and shoulder.
"Tommy down! Ghosted up!" Donovan hauled Riley rearward, Ramirez sighting on the flash. A 60mm from the light section, fired by a squad led by Guadalcanal vet PFC Iron Mike Kowalski, walked rounds onto the gun, silencing it in a secondary blast that echoed like judgment. But the cost mounted. By day's end, Weapons Company tallied 12 wounded, 2 KIA. A gunner vaporized mid-load, his tube twisted like licorice. Puller's regiment ground forward 200 yards, but the ridge claimed 300 Marines, the dead stacked like cordwood for hasty burial. Nights were worse. Japanese infiltrators, faces blackened, slithered through the lines, their Arasakas cracking in the dark. Donovan's watch, from 0200 to 0400, was a vigil of nerves. The thud of a knee mortar here, a grenade spoon ping there. One dawn, October 1st, a banzai squad, 20 screaming shadows, charged the mortar line, bayonets gleaming. "Up rifles, pour it on," Harlan bellowed, his .45 barking as Ramirez swung the tube like a club, crushing a skull. Levy, hobbling on crutches from the aid station, lobbed a satchel charge that scattered the wave, but not before Bianchi's replacement took a bayonet to the gut, gasping, "Tell my girl," before fading. The ridges fell piecemeal. On October 12, after a 96-hour bombardment by the USS Maryland's 16-inchers, shells that cratered the coral like meteor strikes, Harlan's mortarmen laid a rolling barrage for the final assault on the point. Spotters called adjustments in yards. Add 50, danger close 20. The 81mm thundered 400 rounds, the ground quaking as if Peleliu itself rebelled. Marines flamethrowered the caves, napalm from TBM Avengers turning entrances to infernos. Nakagawa's survivors, holed up with 5,000 dead already, fought to the last, but by October 15 the pocket cracked, Puller's men seizing the crest at bayonet point. Casualties were apocalyptic. The 1st Division lost 1,288 killed and 5,812 wounded, nearly 70% combat ineffective, against 10,695 Japanese dead, only 19 surrendering. Harlan's company emerged a husk, 18 dead, 42 wounded, tubes warped from overuse. Donovan, bandaged from a frag hit to the thigh, lit a soggy camel, staring at the conquered ridge, a pockmarked moonscape where buzzards wheeled. "Boomer, you owe me that beer," he rasped to Levy, now on morphine haze. Ramirez nodded, his Silver Star oak leaf cluster pinned crooked. "And a steak, Sarge, no more sea rats." Evacuation came October 20, the Cactus Air Force's C-47s ferrying the broken to Pavuvu, the division's rest island, a pigsty of sand fleas and dysentery. There, under palm-thatched hospitals, Terzi, now a captain, rotated in from stateside, visited his old platoon. "You boys turned ridges to rubble. MacArthur owes you the Philippines." But the cost lingered. Riley shipped home with a purple heart, his arm a ruin. Kowalski, the light mortar ace, malaria-racked and coughing blood. Peleliu's scars ran deep, a Pyrrhic prelude to Leyte, where the diversion succeeded, but the blood price haunted planners. Admiral Halsey called it a cruel waste, but for Donovan's crew, it was survival etched in coral. As the hospital ship rocked them toward Ulithi, Harlan penned the after-action. "Mortarmen don't win wars. They hold the line when rifles falter. For the ridges, for the dead, we fired true." The sea whispered agreement, but the war's drumbeat called to bloodier shores. Iwo's black sands, Okinawa's typhoons. April 1st, 1945, Easter Sunday, dubbed Love Day by the planners, dawned blood red over the Agushi beaches of Okinawa, the last great barrier before Japan's home islands. The island, a 60-mile pork chop of subtropical ridges and pineapple fields, bristled with 100,000 Imperial Japanese Army troops under Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima, entrenched in a web of 30,000 caves and reverse-slope defenses along the Shuri line. Operation Iceberg called for the U.S. 10th Army, 540,000 men under General Simon Buckner, to smash through, but the south half was a fortress of coral tombs. The 1st Marine Division, the old breed, scarred from Guadalcanal's fevers and Peleliu's pyres, formed the left flank. 1st and 6th Marines assaulting the northern beaches, their weapons companies, Mortarmen chief among them, bracing for the grinder. For Sergeant Frank Donovan and his 81mm crew in Weapons Company 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, K-35, it was a homecoming to hell. The tubes they'd cursed on Peleliu now slung for one final leap.
The ridges fell piecemeal. On October 12, after a 96-hour bombardment by the USS Maryland's 16-inchers, shells that cratered the coral like meteor strikes, Harlan's mortarmen laid a rolling barrage for the final assault on the point. Spotters called adjustments in yards. Add 50, danger close 20. The 81mm thundered 400 rounds, the ground quaking as if Peleliu itself rebelled. Marines flamethrowed the caves, napalm from TBM Avengers turning Donovan's Amtrak bucked through the surf at Yellow Beach 1, the ramp dropping into knee-deep brine laced with diesel and cordite. At 27, the Brooklyn sergeant's frame was whittled by island rot. Malaria's legacy, a perpetual shiver, but his eyes burned with the fatalism of the blooded. Corporal Eddie Ramirez sighted the tube from the well deck, his silver star from bloody nose a talisman against the kamikazes that swarmed like hornets overhead. PFC Sammy Levy, leg mended but limping on a captured Arasaka crutch, humped ammo crates. Tommy Riley, honorably discharged after Peleliu's frag, had been replaced by Private First Class Slick Harlan, a greasy-haired kid from Philly whose quick hands belied farm boy nerves. Captain Eli Harlan, no relation to the Slick, but the coincidence a platoon joke, commanded from the lead LVT, his Fordham drawls steady over the bullhorn. Mortars ashore first, set up on the reverse slope, cover the push inland. The landing was a miracle of misdirection. Feints at southern beaches drew Ushijima's fire, leaving Hagushi a ghost town of abandoned pillboxes. By 1,000 hours, the 1st Division had 20,000 ashore with light casualties, fewer than 100. Seizing Yontan and Kadena airfields intact, the runways a prize for P-38s to contest the skies. Donovan's section humped 800 yards inland, the coral roads crunching like broken teeth under their boots, Okinawa's rain-slicked fields a deceptive Eden. They emplaced amid a pineapple plantation, the 81mm bipod sinking into red clay, tubes zeroed on the Motobu Peninsula's northern ridges, where the 6th Marines would soon tangle with the enemy's vanguard. Range check. Grid Oscar 2, elevation 400 mils, Ramirez called, cranking the sight as Levy dropped a registration round. The cough echoed, the shell cratering a tree line 1,200 yards out, smoke blooming like a signal fire. But Okinawa's true venom lay south beyond the initial beaches. The northern half fell swiftly. By April 18th, the 1st Division had swept 20 miles to Nago, casualties under 1,000, the Japanese 44th Independent Mixed Brigade shattered in cave fights and banzai swarms. Donovan's mortarmen supported the mop-up, their plunging fire sealing cave mouths where holdouts lobbed grenades like confetti. One dawn patrol, April 10th, flushed a squad from a sinkhole. Harlan called, "Danger close, smoke 'em." The 81mm WP rounds choked the hole in acrid fog, Marines flamethrowering the survivors, their screams a guttural symphony. "Like Peleliu, but with typhoons," Donovan muttered, wiping phosphorus burns from his sleeves. Levy, ever the wise guy, quipped, "At least the Jabs here got manners, suicide boats instead of charges." Relief came too soon.
On April 19th, as the 6th Marines rotated south to the Shuri meatgrinder, K-35 countermarched 25 miles under pouring rain, the division's trucks churning mudslides on Highway 1. The Shuri line, a 7-mile crescent of reverse-slope ridges honeycombed with 20-foot tunnels, loomed like a dragon's spine. Ushijima's 32nd Army dug in with 75mm guns and knee mortars that arced from unseen slits. The 1st Marines, under Colonel James S. Stevens, targeted the center, Wana Ridge and its flanking horrors, Chocolate Drop, Sugar Loaf, and the Horseshoe, a tripod of death where coral cliffs dropped sheer to the reverse slope, invisible to direct fire. May 11th marked the Inferno's peak. Harlan's Weapons Company emplaced in a draw below Sugar Loaf, the ridge a 50-foot hump of razor wire and bunkers, its crest a machine gun nest that enfiladed the approaches. Forward observers from L Company, including a young corporal named Eugene Sledge, a 60mm mortarman turned rifleman in the chaos, radioed back, "Enemy strong point at Apex, range 400, troops in open." Donovan's tube thundered first, the 81mm HE walking up the slope in 50-yard bounds, cratering the coral in geysers of dust and limbs. "Add 25, fire for effect," Harlan ordered, the platoon loosing 200 rounds in 20 minutes, the air vibrating with the overpressure. The assault wave, Easy Company's doughboys, faces blackened, Garand slung, charged behind the barrage, but Sugar Loaf bit back. Japanese 47mm anti-tank guns zeroed from caves, raked the flats. Knee mortars whispered death from the flanks. Marines fell in windrows, a lieutenant gut-shot, screaming for his mother. A radio man shredded, his set sparking like a firefly. Sledge's squad gained the crest only to be counterattacked by a banzai platoon, 50 fanatics with satchels and bayonets, faces daubed in ash. "Incoming, banzai at the top," the FO yelled. Harlan switched to canister rounds, rare anti-personnel loads that burst like giant shotguns. Donovan's crew firing blind into the melee, the shrapnel mingling friend and foe. By dusk, Sugar Loaf was a pyre, 300 Japanese dead, but Lee Company lost 150, the ridge retaken thrice, only to slip away in the night. Donovan's ears rang from the blasts, his hands raw from ramming shells, the tube barrel glowing cherry red. "How many pushes today?" Levy gasped, bandaging a frag nick on his cheek. Ramirez tallied, 4, and tomorrow's Friday, Buckner's pushing for Palm Sunday. The captain, Harlan, slumped in his CP hole, map bloodied. 10th Army's bleedin', 2,600 casualties today alone, but Shuri's crackin'. The grinder turned weekly. Wana Draw, May 14th to 18th, was a cul-de-sac of cliffs where the 2nd Battalion 1st Marines funneled into kill zones, Japanese artillery from Half Moon Hill registering on the trapped. Donovan's section displaced forward, manhandling the 81mm up a goat path under Nebelwerfer rockets. German screaming mimes captured and turned by Ushijima's gunners. Emplaced on a knife-edged ledge, they fired point blank. Elevation 200 mils, charges cut to half for the short arc. "Spotters down, use the flare," Harlan bellowed. As a 60mm light section took a direct hit, the crew vaporized in a pink mist. Levy sighted on muzzle flashes, Riley loading like a demon, the shells plunging into the draw's mouth, collapsing cave entrances and avalanches of coral. Kamikazes added aerial apocalypse. From April 6th's Operation Kikasui onward, 1,900 suicide planes hammered the fleet, sinking picket destroyers and wounding 7,000 sailors. On May 11th, as Sugar Loaf raged, a Val dive bomber plowed into the USS Bunker Hill 400 yards offshore, its bombs cooking off in secondary blasts that showered the beach with flaming debris. Donovan's crew buttoned into their pit, shrapnel pattering like hail, the sky a pyre of tracers and burning silk. "The Navy's earning their pay today," Ramirez muttered, clutching his rosary.
By May 21, the 1st Division had chewed through the tripod. Sugar Loaf sealed after 1,655 Marine casualties in 6 days. Wana Draw a tomb for 2,000 Japanese. But Shuri held, Ushijima shifting south to the new line. The division rotated into reserve May 25, hunkered in flooded foxholes amid Okinawa's rainy season typhoons that turned roads to rivers. Disease felled more than bullets.
Amoebic dysentery and trenchfoot swelled the sick lists to 10,000. Donovan's platoon nursed fevers in a Quonset sickbay, quinine IVs dripping like jungle vines. Slick Harlan, the rookie, cracked first, malaria delirium whispering of Philly cheesesteaks, shipped stateside with a medical Purple Heart. The coup de grace came May 29. After 2,000 tons of TNT from the USS Tennessee pulverized the escarpment, the 5th Marines stormed Shuri Castle, a gutted shell atop the ridge. Harlan's Mortarmen laid a final barrage, smoke and HE to mask the breach, then ceased fire as Leathernecks planted the flag amid rubble-strewn halls. Ushijima's HQ fell intact, but the general slipped south, his army melting into caves for guerrilla war. The 1st Division tallied 2,662 killed and 9,113 wounded in 82 days. The bloodiest Pacific campaign, Okinawa's civilians dying in the crossfire at 150,000. June 22nd marked the island secure. Buckner dead to a stray shell the day prior, the only U.S. flag officer killed in the Pacific. The old breed evacuated to Guam, their ranks hollowed, 40% casualties, tubes warped and crews ghosts. Donovan, Levy, and Ramirez shipped on the USS El Dorado, the sea a balm after coral cuts. In the hold, under swaying hammocks, Donovan unrolled a captured rising sun banner stained with Shuri mud. For the ridges, he toasted with captured sake. Levy nodded, his crutch tapping rhythm. And the ships that didn't sink. Harlan, promoted major, penned the roster. Mortimers of K-35. They arced the arc of victory. Okinawa broke the back of resistance, paving Hiroshima's shadow. For Donovan's crew, the meatgrinder yielded silence, not peace, but pause. As Saipan loomed for occupation duty, the tubes crated, they dreamed of stateside piers. The war ended August 14th, VJ Day a radio whisper amid Adams' fire. Homecomings blurred. Donovan to Brooklyn docks, Ramirez to LA shipyards, Levy to Bronx synagogues. But Shuri's echo lingered, a mortar's cough in quiet nights. The Mortarmen, unsung architects of ridges fallen, carried the island's weight home, steel in soul, fire in memory. The autumn of 1945 painted the Jersey shore in hues of faded glory, the Atlantic's salt spray a faint echo of Pacific typhoons. Sergeant Frank Donovan stepped off the USS General John M.C.E. Sheehan at Bayonne Port, his sea bag heavy with crated souvenirs, a Japanese officer's sword chipped from Sugar Loaf's bayonet work, and a dog-eared copy of Sledge's diary, borrowed and never returned. At 28, Donovan was a relic of the old breed, his Brooklyn swagger tempered by islands that had claimed his youth, Guadalcanal's fevers, Peleliu's coral knives, Okinawa's endless rains. The war ended not with a bang, but a radio crackle on August 15th, Hiroshima and Nagasaki's shadows rendering Shuri's caves moot. VJ Day found K-3/5 scattered on Guam, mortars stacked like forgotten gods, crews nursing hookworm and ghosts in palm frond barracks. Homecoming was a parade of contradictions. Donovan's ma met him at the docks with a tear-streaked hug and a pot of gnocchi, the aroma chasing away sea ration ghosts. "Frankie, my mortar boy, your skin and bones." But the docks, where he'd once slung crates for a dime, now hummed with peacetime bustle. Liberty ships rusting at piers, vets hawking war bonds for college. The GI Bill beckoned, a mechanical engineering course at Brooklyn Poly, turning tube-sighting math into blueprints for bridges, not bunkers. Yet nights brought the arc, dreams of 81mm shells whistling like banshees, Levy's quip lost in Okinawa's mud. Boomer Levy, the Bronx survivor, made it home too, his leg a perpetual hitch, but his wit sharper, opening a deli in the Bronx where pastrami sandwiches came with tales of Wanna-Draw.
Sarge, you fire the last round. I'll sling the rye. Corporal Eddie Ramirez washed ashore in San Pedro, California, the Pacific's roar a cruel tease. His silver star, 2 clusters now, pinned crooked at Shuri, earned Heroes ticker tape in East LA, but the parade floats couldn't erase Sugar Loaf's screams. Ramirez, the sighting wizard, traded mortar sights for Hollywood spotlights, a grip on Republic Pictures lots, rigging lights for John Wayne westerns that sanitized the war into black and white heroism. Cap and Harlan'd laugh. We dropped HE, now it's celluloid. But Wayne's drawl grated. Too clean, no coral rot. Ramirez married a nurse from Pavuvu, their kids growing up on stories of Uncle Slick's phantom charges, the family hearth a bulwark against flashbacks that struck like knee mortars at barbecues.